And finally, Russia has cautioned that the deployment of U.S. military trainers to Ukraine could further destabilize the country's volatile eastern regions.
The participation of instructors and experts from third countries on Ukrainian territory, of course, does not help resolve the conflict. On the contrary, it can seriously destabilize the situation.
Well, Peskov's remarks came after Washington announced that some 300 U.S. paratroopers have arrived in Ukraine to train forces there. The training mission, initially scheduled to start in March, was suspended until further progress was made in implementing the mid-February truce deal between pro-Russians and Kiev. The UK has already sent military personnel to train Ukrainian troops, while Canada and Poland have pledged to send 250 instructors respectively this year. The U.S. and its Western allies have repeatedly accused Russia of supporting pro-Moscow fighters. The Kremlin, however, has rejected those allegations. Well, to discuss that further, I'm joined by Mr. Dmitry Linik, who is a political commentator, and he is joining us live now via Skype from London. Sir, thanks very much for joining us here on Press TV. How do you feel about this deployment of these U.S. trainers?
Well, obviously, it is fraught with some sort of escalation in the circumstances when the country is in the grip of a sort of low-burning civil war. It's fraught with immediate dangers. In fact, well, the situation now is that after the Minsk peace accords that you mentioned, France, Germany, and Russia, the signatories, have been pushing for peace in Ukraine, while on the other hand, the United States, the UK, Canada, and Poland that provided these trainers, the coaching, the military specialists, instructors for Ukraine, which runs, of course, counter to the very idea of a peace settlement. And they're also discussing the so-called lethal aid. Clearly, none of the European countries would provide that training or military aid without the Americans say so. So what we're seeing is a push on behalf of Washington, and Kiev sort of follows routinely what Washington tells it to do. They are trying to resolve the situation by brute military force, and that's all there is to it.
But it's a bit confusing, is it not, sir? Because, you know, obviously, as you mentioned there, the truce in Minsk was signed and has largely been holding, although there have been many violations. But is this an odd message to be sending, is it not, on the part of the U.S., that even though the truce is largely holding, that they're going to be training even more Ukrainian troops?
Well, that is one thing. I completely agree with what you've just pointed up. Another interesting element to that is that the training is to be provided not to regular Ukrainian army units even, but to the so-called National Guard battalions. They're volunteer battalions that ideologically are sort of the vanguard force of Ukrainian nationalism. Ironically, though, those units are not only anti-Russian, virulently so, but also pretty much anti-Western, so there may be surprises for the West on that path as well.
Okay, we'll leave it there at that, but of course we do appreciate you taking your time out to speak to us today. That was Mr. Dmitry Linik, who was speaking to us live from London.